Cool. You ready to get started?
Okay. Okay. Well, my name was Catherine Adelor. I was born in Philadelphia, July 31, 1934. That makes me 86 years old, but I'll be 87 in July.
All right. Excellent. So, did you have a middle name, or did you take a
My
Catholic name?
middle name is Elizabeth. I'm Catherine Elizabeth, former name Adelor, but I'm Catherine Elizabeth Ellis when I married. As a child, we were like a poorer family, so I didn't have many toys. I never had a bicycle, and I never learned to ride a bicycle. We used to play in the steps, and I guess we played hopscotch out in the street and played what they call jacks on the steps. And I did have skates, though, and we skate up and down the street. So they were my favorite toys. That's what I had.
Little skate.
Barbara.
Tell me about Barbara.
Well, I was more of a shy kid, and she was one and outgoing. And so I palled around with her. And we just did a lot of things. We skated together, and, we just did all those things, those playing games and all like that.
What types of games did you play?
Well, like I said, outdoor games. So as far as indoor games, we didn't have that many. Maybe bingo.
So you guys would just skate around the block together, causing trouble and stuff?
Well, I didn't plan. I wasn't a troublemaker. And we collected bottle caps and things like that. Just you made your own fun, your toys. Like I said, I didn't. And of course, growing up, we never had a telephone. We never had a car. So I rode the trolleys and the buses. I went to a Catholic school, and I walked every day about more than 20 blocks to school. And at lunchtime, I would run all the way home, have a sandwich or something, and then run all the way back to school to be on time.
Was this elementary school?
Elementary school.
Elementary school, you run back and forth?
Yes. Then I went to 8th grade. And then after 8th grade, when I graduated, I went to John Hallahan High School for Girls in Philadelphia, which was right near Logan Square, or down near the Basilica of Peter and Paul. And I went 4 years of Catholic school with Catholic school girls. And when I was a senior, I was a good student. And I had, different set of friends like everyone has in high school and all. He was going on 16, I believe. He played football for Roman Catholic. He was injured, and then he went to the hospital, and they found out he had cancer. And they gave him like 6 months to a year to live. And that was a hard year in my senior year. But at the same time, they had an election before that happened, and I was picked the May Queen. And that was a big honor at Hallahan because we were near the Parkway. And our school, we walked through the Parkway to the cathedral in a procession. And I actually have a picture of it upstairs at the altar when I was given the crown for our Blessed Mother. But it was so difficult because the May procession was on May 15th of that year, and my brother passed away on May 13th. Mm. And that day before the May procession, I'll never forget, my brother had a viewing at night. And all the friends of my Hallahan and Roman Catholic high school is where he went. There were blocks of people for the viewing. And of course, my family, we were black in the morning, that night, and in the morning for the funeral. And then the funeral in the morning of May 15th, that afternoon, the nuns at the high school made me a gown and a crown like a bride. And in the morning I wore black. In the afternoon, with the May procession, I was in white. And I'll never forget that time. Of course, I have another brother, Bob. So I was the only girl and had two brothers. All right. So Bob was 7 years younger than me. I was the oldest one. And it was like the end of the Second World War. My father, he worked. He left the Philippines when he was 18 years old and traveled around the world, worked on a ship. And he met my mother at a USO dance in Philadelphia. And they met, and then he would come into port every once in a while and he'd meet my mother and her sister. And they finally got married, and my mother was Irish. I thought she was completely Irish descent. I mean, she was, but my grandfather, I found out through ancestry, was English. So he met my mother, I guess, in Ireland, but they came over from Ireland, my grandparents. And I remember my grandfather, and he died earlier of cancer. And then my grandmother, all I can remember her is she was diabetic. But at that time, years ago, they didn't have much to do for diabetics. And I can remember her as always being in a wheelchair and blind. So luckily my mother and the rest of their children, but it must have skipped that generation because I'm the one that's diabetic from my grandmother. My father, he died young of a heart attack. And actually, I remember during the end of the Second World War, he worked at Exide Batteries, but he went in to work. He was older. He went into the Merchant Marines and worked on ships to deliver supplies to our troops in Europe and all. And he would come home once in a while. And I still remember one time he missed a ship that was going to France, and that ship was blown up. And so we were fortunate we still had our father. But he had a heart problem, and he died at like 51 years old. So, but anyway, far as my life is concerned, when I got out of when I was a junior in high school, I worked at Bell Telephone in the accounting department. And I used to walk from school to Bell Telephone after school and work from 4 to 8 o'clock at night, and then come home on a trolley, 5 days a week. And I was so proud. I made $20 a week. But I gave my parents $15 and I had $5 to spend. But it's things were so much less expensive then.
Yeah.
You could go get a loaf of bread and milk and everything else for 15 cents, But that's how I grew up. And then I remember with the war, the end of the war, I stood in line with my mother to get food stamps. And, things were very hard to get then, with the war. But then when the war was over, the Second World War, my mother had worked at, with the war effort, worked in a factory as, you ever see those commercials like Rosie the Riveter? Mm-hmm. But she worked in a factory, to help with the war supplies. And I remember the day the war ended, I was home with my two brothers, and we heard the war was over, and people at that time all came out of their houses, and we just watched from our door. They used pots and pans to celebrate, and they walked up and down the streets banging the pots and pans for the war was over. But that was a good thing, I guess you want to know how I met my husband.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So then, after I graduated, I got a job at the Pennsylvania Railroad Company in the accounting department. I guess it's still there around 32nd and Market or in that area. And I worked there for several years. Well, what happened is I actually met my husband, Joe. Probably, I was getting on a trolley with my friends from school, and it was probably like junior year in high school. And he was with his friends, and we all said hello. I never saw him again. But about senior year, at that time, what most all my friends and we did for entertainment, we went to dances at different churches every weekend. They had Friday night dances, Saturday night dances, and that's how we all got to socialize and meet with other young people, our age. So this one time, I was going to a dance from my former school, Our Lady of Mercy, and I was waiting to meet some friends there on the corner. And my husband, Joe, walked up. He was going to go to the dance. And he said hello, and I said hello. And as we were standing on the corner at Broad and Susquehanna in North Philadelphia, there was a subway entrance there, and some woman got robbed of her handbag. And that's like in 1950s, And it scared me, because I walked home from the dance over 20 blocks by myself at night. Mm-hmm. So I said, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'll go to the dance or not. I'll be afraid going home. And of course, Joe, to the rescue, said, well, I'll walk you home. And I said, okay. So we went into the dance, but I never danced with him. I was with my friends. He was with his friends. And when it came time to leave, he says, well, I'll walk you home. And I said, okay. So he walks me home, and we get out to my house, which at that time I lived in a street at that time was called Shy Park, where the baseball games were. Mm-hmm. But then it was called Connie Mack Stadium. And it was that far from where my school was. So he walked me to my house, and we were standing outside, and my brother Paul walked up, because I was a senior, he was a sophomore. And he walked up and was going into the house, and he said hello to Joe, and Joe said, who is that? I said, that's my brother. they knew each other because they played on the football team.
Mm.
So my brother was a football player in his sophomore year, and he was a quarterback. And he went into the house, and it was funny because everybody knew each other, and he didn't know he was my brother. And then what happened, of course, then he says, "Do you want to go to the St. Joseph dance?" That was another parish. Then I guess on Sunday night they had it. So I said, okay. So we went to the dance, I guess I danced with him then. But then what happened is at senior year, in those years, the Korean War was on. And he had gotten drafted by the Army. A lot of young people were graduating, young men from high school were getting drafted into the Army. Well, before the Army, I guess I don't know what year he joined, he went into the Naval Reserve. It's like not the Coast Guard, the National Guard or whatever. And he learned different things for the service. So what happened when he got drafted, he automatically went into the Navy. He had his choice, I guess. And then he went into the Navy, and I was working at the time in the Pennsylvania Railroad Company. And then after he was in the service about a year or so ago, he missed me, I guess, and came home and all that. But then we got engaged. And we were to get married the next year around Valentine's Day.
Were you guys talking the whole time too?
Oh yeah, we were in touch all the time.
Okay.
Or when he came home, I saw him. Or one time when he was in training in Baltimore, I went down the train and I met him. So we kept in touch, And but then what happened? He came home maybe after a year was in the service, and he gave me an engagement ring, and then we were planning to get married, I think in February on Valentine's Day. Reason being that he was going to be, I don't know whether it's office training or he was going to be stationed or something, and he was going to have 2 weeks off, and so it was going to be in February. So that worked out fine, and I think that's how we planned our February wedding. But what happened is they changed it in January and said he was going to be coming in home the end of January and had to go back in February around Valentine's Day. So at that time, I had my bridesmaids, I had my gown and all that, but we got married in church. It was called Holy Innocents Church in Juniata Park. This is where my family was living then. And I went to the church, and there was no problem. Nobody gets married in January those years. And so I was able to move it up, to January. And then as far as the reception went, I had no problem. I could have the reception. Nobody gets married, No. And then in those days around wintertime and all. But we were getting married then because that's when he was going to be home. Yeah. And so then he came home, I guess, a day before we were married. And we got married January 29th, I think. And then he was still in the service. But at the time he was still in the service, he got stationed at the Philadelphia Naval Hospital because he was in the medical corps. He joined the medical corps. And they either could go to San Diego or they could go on a ship, or they had certain, when they graduated, places to go. And he went to the Naval Hospital. So he came home. So what happened at that time when he was in the service, I lived still in Juniata Park with my mom and dad. And he came home, and we lived there, you know. And then, of course, we had Linda, who was our first child, and she was born at the Naval Hospital in Philadelphia. When he was working there at the pediatric ward. So he still got to see her more than I saw her because she was premature and had stayed at the hospital for like a week or so after she was born. So he took care of her, you know, at the hospital. And then, you know, she came home. And we lived there, I guess, until he got out of the service. And then at that time, they had what they called a GI loan. And we could buy a house for $200 down.
Wow.
So we bought a row house in Mayfair. And we were getting ready to go to settlement and all that. And this, of course, was after my father had passed away. And at that time in Juniata Park, where my mother lived, we were going to move. And then at that time, after we bought the house and we're ready to go to a settlement, she said, "Do you want to buy my house where I lived?" And it was like, okay, you know, because it was a nicer house. The basement was finished. That's where we lived, and we really liked it there. So what happened is I had a girlfriend, because at that stage, when we were all in our 20s, we married younger. Everybody was getting married. You know, like our friends were getting married. And she's getting married. And her and her husband, future husband, so they were looking for a house. We sold them the house in Mayfair. And then we bought my mother's house. And then my mother was there with us for a while. But my mother, since she lost my dad after many years, there was a man that she knew for a long time that lived in New Jersey, in Morristown, New Jersey, and they knew each other. He had lost his wife. So they ended up getting married. And then she lived over there for a couple of years, but it didn't work out. And she came back, and she got an apartment at the end of our street in Juniata Park. The end units were like rentals, and she got one there. So she was close by for a while. It was good because, you know, I had Lynn, and then I had Diane 4 years later. And then we lived there until it was too close to traffic on Erie Avenue. And they used to ride their bicycles up and around the block and all. And I was just worried about the traffic, you know. So we found a house in Somerton, the edge of the city, a single house. And it was like what they call Cape Cod. And we moved up there. And when we were up there, that's when Paul was born. And we lived up there, I guess, we lived in that house for about 8 years, I think, or so. But at that time, it's when I lived there when Paul was a baby and President John Kennedy was killed. Remember all that? And then what afterwards, I don't know, I think Paul was still a baby. We actually had a fire upstairs because the Cape Cod is on one floor with like 2 bedrooms and a bath, but has like a dormer type second floor, which just had a bath and 2 bedrooms. And Linda and Diane slept upstairs, and Paul was downstairs in the baby room, and our room was downstairs. We were downstairs. I was feeding Paul breakfast like 8 o'clock in the morning or something in his high chair. And Linda came out. It was like the winter time. I think it was February. And she comes run to the top of the stairs and says, "Fire, fire." And she's standing there with a glass of water. And she's like, I think she's around 7 years old or something like that. And here it had been cold upstairs. So we had a room heater, and we had it like, say, here, and they had their twin beds, like they each had a twin bed. And when she got up to go to the bathroom, she threw the spread out and went into the bathroom, and it caught on to the heater, and it caught fire. And it went right up, and Joe ran upstairs, and it caught onto the drapes and everything, and it got everybody out. And we went next door knocking at the door, can we get in, and call the fire company. And when they came, they were on the wrong block, down a block, and the upstairs was on fire. So it's Pop-Up will tell you all the funny stories of the Keystone. He calls them like the Keystone Cops came and everything else. But they had, with the hoses and everything. But they put the fire out, but we had to live elsewhere until the house was repaired. But we lived there for a while, and then the second home, from there, I think we moved to Churchville. And we were there for about 15 years. I guess when your mom and dad got married and you were a baby, and moved into the house that they're still in Deer Path. And then as they got old, Paul stayed with us until he was about 28, late 20s, and he moved out because he kept saying he was the only one home. Diane, your mom got married, Linda left, and we said, you can stay here, Paul, He said, I think what it was, he wanted to have his own place and date girls, so I didn't want to bring him to our house, And, but then he it was so funny, he met Donna and all, and he kept saying, I'm never getting married till I'm 30 years old. I said, okay, that's fine. And he did. He got married at 30. And then he had 1, 2, 3, 4 children. But, everything was fine, and me and Papa were so happy to have such 6 great grandchildren. We're so lucky. 3 boys, 3 girls, and Pop-Up used to say to people, if I knew how great the grandchildren were, I would skip the children. Which, yeah, how do you do that? But, so it's been good. And like I said, we tried to attend most of their graduations and sports events and things like that. So we really feel very blessed. Yeah. Oh, it means a lot. I mean, I feel sorry for people that, that didn't have children or don't have a family and they're alone. It's family means a great deal. And I always wish that our family stays together because I used to say to Paul, Diane, and Linda, I want you always to be in touch because I had friends who children didn't do well and they moved away and don't even talk to their parents. And that's a sad thing, But no, I feel like we're really blessed. Oh, as a career, well, when we lived in Churchville, and I guess the kids were getting to be teenagers. Actually, they were I don't know the exact age, but when we lived in Churchville, and the girls were going to go to proms, Linda and Diane, and this extra money that we needed for their activities when they were in sports and prom gowns and all that. I got a job at the IRS during tax season, and I worked in their accounting department over 9 years during tax seasons. And that was interesting too, because at one time I was in the department where we did the tax returns. And at one year I had a lot of the celebrity tax forms and used to see how much they made and where they lived and all this stuff. It was, I mean, we weren't allowed to tell people that, but that was interesting. So I worked there over 9 years, but then, let me see, where else did I work? I think I even worked a little part-time, like after Lynn was born, because my mother was around. And I worked around Rittenhouse Square for an insurance company, like part-time. Then I worked at the IRS. And then I don't know, Linda had left. I think your mother, I don't know, she was married then, I forget. I guess it was in the 1980s. I felt like I wanted to do something else. So I went to school, and I went to Bucks County Community College to learn real estate. Oh, I know how I got into real estate. At that time, I went another job for these extra things, and I entered an ad for like a receptionist or secretary at a real estate. And I worked for Holland Realty about a year or so, and I worked taking calls and getting contracts together, that type of thing. And then what happened is I got interested in it, and I thought, they make good commissions, and that's what you work on is commission when you're getting real estate. So I went to school and got my real estate license. And it was so funny. I was still working as a secretary, but I had my license. And in my office, there were like at least 6 realtors or something. It wasn't a big office, but they all had schedules. And sometimes you worked for a builder in the sample home. Sometimes you showed houses, resales. So what happened is, it's one time I'm in the office at the desk. I'm the secretary. And one of these salesmen, Sam, his name was, he says, I'm not going to be in this week at the model. He said, cover for me. And he said, cover for me. And I said, okay. And I had my license. I figured he wanted me to cover. So I went to the it was up in Holland, to the model, the model that was built. And I was there because I had a real estate, and people were coming in, talking to them and everything. And I sold the house. So I get back in, and the realtor, she was a realtor, but she ran the schedule. And she was livid because she didn't put me on the schedule. And I said to her, well, Sam said me to cover me. He meant for me to tell them that he wasn't going to be in and they would cover. But he didn't mean for me to cover. I didn't know that. So what happened is the boss, who was the boss of the real estate, who paid us and everything, he said, well, she sold the house. She put her on the schedule. That's how I got on the schedule. So then when I was on the schedule, then I at that time, I drove and I took people out to resales. And of course they also worked with this builder in Holland, Mickey Schrenk and his brother, and they built nice homes. And so then I got more interested in doing the sales like from with the builders, because it's so much easier. You work in the samples, so you work on weekends. So that was the not bad part, but was not a good part, because I could never go to, like, weekends I worked.
Yeah.
Weddings and things, parties and stuff. I had to go later, I couldn't always go. But I worked in in the new construction, and it was nice because the people came to you, and you had brochures, and you could show them the different models, and sell the houses they liked. Well, however, the first year in real estate in the 1980s that I was in, I didn't sell a thing because it was a bad market. Things went down and you couldn't sell houses. And I never made any money for the first year. But after that, when things picked up, I did good selling houses and making nice commissions. But because Papa was still working too, at that time, I put money away because I put into investments and stuff. You know what I mean? I said, for a future. So every time I got a commission, I would put some money into a stock or whatever. I went to a broker and, they handled it. So that's what was a good thing because, we lived on what we had and all. But also what happened, another good thing was that I was working, we lived in Churchville for about 15 years. But then it came a time like when you live in a house we bought that new. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable. We only spent like $20,000 for it. Now they're selling for $400,000, $500,000. But anyhow, I sold it myself when I was showing someone when we decided to move into another new home in Holland because I worked for the builder. So we decided to do that. I was showing a house to this optician, and he had a business and all. And I just said to him, well, you want to see my house? I'm thinking about selling it. And they bought it. So I sold it myself. So anyhow, when we got into our new house in Holland, it was so great because I worked for the builder and I got a lot of upgrades. You were a baby when we moved in Holland. You never really remember my house in Holland because I used to watch you in your playpen when your mom was still working. She'd bring you over like during the day and I would have you in the playpen and I'd put you outside in the playpen and all that. And you were number one, And so that was nice because I saw you as a baby, Mm-hmm. But the house was really nice. That was the best house we ever owned because the construction was great, and I got crown molding. I got big kitchen. I got stone fireplace. I got the outside of the house was stone. I got a 2-car garage, all stained wood, and just what we wanted. And because I was still making money and able to pay for some of the stuff, so we did well. But then, what happened after we were there about 10 years or so, and I had a heart attack, and I was around 60, and I had bypass surgery, triple bypass. And then after that, I didn't really, I stopped working for a little bit. And then I did get a part-time job with that, the builders at what they called the design center. And I only worked 3 days a week. But that was nice because what I did was when people came in to pick their carpet, their cabinets, for the homes, I would help them and, like write up the order and things like that. So I worked that until, let me see, and I guess I retired. Okay. And then Pop-Up, still had his business. Mm-hmm. And I thought he was going to retire too because when he was 65, I had a big party up at the Northampton Country Club, a surprise party, mm-hmm. where he was turning 65 because he was going to retire. And it was a surprise, and it was a really nice party, his friends and all. Then it turned out that he came on and he says, I'm not retiring. He kept saying, I'm not retiring in May. May the day never come. And he still kept a business until he was about 70 years old. So it was funny, but, that's kind of a total of our life. It's hard to say because I don't think I have a best. I probably do good in most things, but I guess someone else would have to judge my skills. I think different people say different things. Like Linda would say, I'm best at doing decorating or doing certain things, I really don't know what your mom would say. And of course, with some of your friends, every time they always tell you things are great, but you can never believe what they say. For instance, right now, my hair, I let it get all gray, and Linda thinks it's great. But other people think it makes you look like your age. So, it's people have different opinions.
Okay.
Well, I don't think I'm that bad a cook.
Good.
I'm trying to think. I guess I'm worse at that I'm not really athletic at all. I can't swim. I took swim lessons, but I thought I drowned. I can't, I'm not really good physically. I never played sports, you know what I mean? And I used to sew. I can't believe that. I think Alina's so great because she did mix. People wouldn't believe when I was young. I used to bake all kinds of pies, and when I lived in summer, we had 2 peach trees. When the girls are, Paul was taking a nap, the girls are in school in the wintertime, and I used to make all kinds of. I tried every kind of pie there was. Lemon meringue. I used to beat all the meringue, everything from scratch. And I made all kinds of peach pies, peach preserves, peach cobbler, whatever, because we have peach trees. Let me see what else. But I used to sew. And when the girls were little, I made their sunsuits, dresses, things like that. Because I took sewing and home economics in high school. And I made drapes. I got a book that said how to line the drapes. And we had a big window in Somerton. And I remember I got all this material. I had a Singer sewing machine. I made the drapes for the windows. I just made a lot of things. And then I even made dresses for myself. I got patterns. And then I had the sewing machine. And after I start working, I never sewed again. And I end up selling or put the Singer sewing machine on a one time when how on Fridays people have flea markets and all. I ended up getting rid of it. And I don't sew to this day. I don't sew anything. I don't make any pies. You get older and you think, I'm too tired to do that. Well, I think what it was is when I was brought up, my father was very strict. And my mother was the fun one. She was Irish. And I remember Saturday night, our big treat, her brother played an accordion. And her and her sister would sing Irish songs and all that. And I would sit and watch them, and our treat was toast with cinnamon and sugar on it and a cup of tea. And that was a lot of fun. But my father was very strict. And I remember when I was about 13 years old, a boy came to the door and asked if I was home. By the way, my grandmother named me Dolly as a baby, and they always call me Dolly. That's a nickname.
Yeah.
And he says, "Is Dolly home?" And my father answers the door. And I was sitting in the living room, and he answers the door, and he says, "Is Dolly home?" And my mother says, "Come back when you're 16 and slam the door." So I was like, afraid to do anything. But when I met Pop-Up,
Yeah.
he was always joking and funny. And honestly, I really didn't care for him when I first met him. And my mother didn't like him. But he always made me laugh. And I think that's what got me to love him, because he always was funny and made me laugh and, kind of broke out of my shell. Well, you even see now he tries to be a big joker. More of a conservative person, not that outgoing like some people. I guess I'm more with friends, more in the one that's more quiet. You know what I mean? I think that's why people observe me. I think I picked up different things along the way. I know when I was about maybe 6, 7, 8, I had a godfather and his wife who worked for wealthy people, and they worked for a Judge Biddle out in the main line. You wouldn't even know who they were. And what they would do is take me out there for vacations. And the judge, they had like 1 or 2 daughters. And I would play with them, and I learned they had dollhouses, and I learned things from them, which I didn't have. And I was always admiring the homes and everything, And then when they also worked for a Cod Walder. I mean, you wouldn't know those names, but they were like, he was a major or something. And they would take me in the summertime when I wasn't going to school and take me on vacations and take me to their home. And they lived in a cottage on the mansion grounds. And I can remember when I was little, we'd be sitting out in the kitchen, and I would peek into where the judge was sitting on. It'd be a real long table, and all he wanted was a hard-boiled egg and toast or something. And my godfather's wife, she was the maid, and he was like a butler. And I would peek through the door and see the judge at the long table. So I got these ideas in my mind that there's another world out there, There are. So it kind of like brings you into what you want to have. You know what I mean? Which I didn't have. But I think I was always appreciated nice things. You know what I mean? That brings you into wanting to, do the best you can. Well, it's like, I think I got that from different people growing up. And I think what I liked is Pop-Up's aunt who raised him, because he lost his mother when he was 8 years old. We used to go, this is awful. We did that at that time when we were just married and just had Lynn and all. And he was we didn't have much money. But of course, we lived on the money that we had. I remember I used to go to get groceries for a week with $20, and I would be buying soup and hot dogs and eggs and things that we could just live on. And every Sunday, we would go out to visit Aunt Margaret to visit them. And of course, they gave us dinner every Sunday. But I learned how a lot of things from cooking from her, which was nice. Like I'd be out in the kitchen and I watch her cook and she would say, "Oh, this is how I make this stuff." And I learned from her about cooking things. I also learned from my father, who was a good cook. He, as he did when he worked on the ships, he worked in as cooking. And he would make us big dinner every Sunday. Sunday was a big day. He would make roast and pies and all this stuff. So, I learned little cooking from him. My mother cooked too, but she only cooked what the Irish food, like ham and cabbage or whatever. But, it was fun growing up. Um, I'm trying to think I think your mom's told you everything.
Oh.
And I probably have a couple. Um, um, it's so funny. It's some of the embarrassing stories happen at church. Uh, uh, I think when before or when I was pregnant a couple times, I would faint in church, and I remember Papa picked me up. Like it was like in the winter, I had a coat and hat, and I just went down, and he picks me up like this, and we were sitting near the front and takes me down the aisle, like carries me like I'm high. So that's embarrassing because people were going, is she all right? And then another time, I remember when I was, I guess I was in eighth grade or something like that. We had to be at Mass. I was late for Mass, and I'm walking down there, and I slip, and I go up in the air, and yeah, and drop my books and everything else. That right in front of the altar, almost like that was embarrassing. Yeah, stuff like that. That's when I got embarrassed. And what happened lately is the reason. I don't know if your mom told you that last a week or so I went to the hospital. Yeah. Well, that was embarrassing because we were sitting around up in Doylestown with friends that we hadn't seen for a year, and we all got vaccinated and everything. But I'm sitting there for 2 hours, and I have a lot of health problems, and I was on a high chair with my legs dangling, but I was getting awful pain in my leg because I have vascular problems. And I said to Papa, "Oh, I don't feel good. I got to, let's go." And I get up and passed out. And I didn't remember what happened. And then I was laying on the floor with all my friends looking at me. And then they call 911 and they bring me and they put me in Doylestown Hospital. They're carrying me out in a stretcher in the ambulance. That was embarrassing. I always felt prayer helped a lot of things, praying. And I pray for everything that comes up. And I try to say the rosary every night, but I fall asleep. And but now I always thought it was important to have religion and to have some faith because that's what gets you through a lot of hard times. Even if you don't have a religion or, go to a church every Sunday, if you just pray, yourself and you pray for, other people and all, like I have a prayer list. And I think it gets you through a whole lot. It keeps you going, And I don't know why some people say, oh, you know, why do I go to church? Why I don't want to go to church? I'll be a hypocrite and all. But they always say there's always room for a hypocrite, you know? So it's not that you have to run to church every week, but I think you should have some kind of prayer, faith in God, you know what I mean? That things will be better. And I'll tell you what, a lot of my prayers are answered when different things go for different people. I pray. So this means a lot to me. Well, I think it's like don't jump to conclusions and try to work things out. You know, be calm. Try to hold your temper, you know what I mean? And try to think through things first, you know, before you make decisions. You know, I mean, don't act on it quickly. You know, think about it. Like they say to people, oh, I have to think overnight about it, you know. And sometimes that's a good thing rather than just doing something really quick, you know, and being sorry for it. But I think you learn that as you go through the years, you learn how to do that because I think when you're younger, you just jump to things too quickly, you know what I mean? And then you think about it later and you figure, well, that wasn't the right thing to do, you know. But I think that just takes maturing, you know, growing. Um, I probably have a couple. People do have regrets, you know, different things. Um, I don't know. I have to think about that. You know, I mean, people often have regrets about a lot of things they do, you know. But right offhand, I can't think of the worst regret, you know what I mean? Mm. Mm. I know with things I don't regret, but I don't, I think of a lot of things I'm grateful for rather than what I regret. You know, Papa and I have traveled all over. I'm so thankful for that. I mean, like we went on cruises. We went to Portugal, and we went to actually some fun things. Well, my my mother, that would be your great grandmother. Do you ever see a picture of her or anything?
The redhead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did. Yeah, that's where your mom says, from my mother. She was funny. She worked one time for Stouffer's. This is after my father died and all. She got a job because she didn't go to high school or anything, those days. I still think it's funny. She used to work in the kitchen, and one time her and another woman, they had barrels of flour and things, sugar and all that stuff. So they had to make all these cakes for the restaurant, So they made all the cakes, the ingredients and all, and put them in the oven, and they opened the oven to take them out, and all the cakes evaporated. They didn't know what happened. Here, when they were making the cakes, they used a barrel that had powdered sugar, and they thought it was flour.
Oh.
And they mixed it all and put it in, and the sugar all melted. I think that's a funny story. That's like the one thing I'm trying to think what I might have done. I probably did a couple dumb things like that, cooking or I don't know. You think it's funny stories that happen with me, right? I know one time I was out with my friends or something, and I got dressed real fast. I was walking around. I had the top one inside out. The label was sticking out the back, you know. And I think they told me. But also in church one time, I remember when we were over and living in Holland, I went to church and I must have had a jacket or a coat or something. And the whole thing was, all through church, was sticking up in the back of my neck. I didn't know it, you know. And when we're going to leave church, this woman came in back of me and she says, wait a minute, and she pushes down. And Pop-Up would never notice anything. She says, your husband should have told you. He was walking in back of me. But Pop-Up's like that. He don't know whether, if I say put the shirt on, I say, oh, is that a new shirt? I say, no, this is about 4 years old. And when I have something new on, he doesn't even know it's new. He has no idea whether I have something old on or new on, or he doesn't notice. It's funny, you know, because I think that's funny. Like, I think some husbands are like, why did you put that dress on or something? He don't care. So, you know, I think that's funny. And, and I know one time I went to work and I had one black shoe on and one blue shoe on. Because I just took them out of the closet, went to work, and I'm looking down, and I found it myself. And here I didn't have the same pair of shoes on. You know, stuff like that is what is funny, yeah. Or I go out of the house and take the wrong, maybe someone's wrong. Oh, I know. Well, it wasn't that funny. One time I went someplace and I had a coat on, like a short coat, like, and I hung it up, and when I went, like you hang them outside, someone took my coat, I don't know who it was, left her orange raggedy coat. As a kind and loving grandmother, that I was like an honest person and try to help when I could, you know, but I don't think anything special. That I loved it all so much, and I just hope you have a good life, you know, and that, you know, and all try to do the best you can, you know, with whatever circumstances you have, you know, and get through everything.
To my grandkids, way down the road. You know.
Oh, I would love to be around for that. Well, listen to the good advice from your mother and father. And, you know, just strive to do the best you can. And, like I say, and try to stay healthy and careful of all your peers. Like, in other words, try to live a good life. Sometimes it doesn't work out like that way. Sometimes, unfortunately, when children are little, they get in with the wrong type of people and they changes their lives, you know. So I would like them to be conscious of who they're with all the time. No, that I'm just so, like I keep saying, I'm so grateful that me and Pop-Up are still here to, hopefully to see your wedding. I keep telling your mom, my goal is to be at Michael's wedding. I think that's what's keeping us alive.
I want to tell you a little bit about what I think about you.
Oh.
For each of these interviews, I get to learn a little bit about you, but I also get to tell you what you've always meant to me at this point. So have always been one of those cornerstone people in my life, somebody that was always there to help raise me and guide me, and someone that was that moral guidance when sometimes it wasn't always there for my mom or my dad or somewhere else, but I know I could always look to you for some dignity and grace in the family.
Oh, that's nice to say.
I'm not done, I got more too. You also had probably the most style out of everything too. If you didn't tout it too much, but you do have a great style, but really knowing what you like, could pinpoint that and execute it, was always just a spectacular skill that I saw in a lot of things, whether it be fashion or how you execute a family event or something like that. You always did it with a certain precision and grace that was just really nice. But you've always been, a person that's always been in my corner, always go to my games. And that's something that I've learned from you family is important.
Oh, yeah.
Growing it and making sure you take care of it. And you and Papa both have taught me, vacation and splurge a little bit. Mm-hmm. Know when to have fun too.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah.
But you're always an amazing person, and I love you very much.
Well, I love you very much too, because